Good evening, everybody. This is the Hillbilly Think Tank, and I am coming at you live from Tunnel Hills here in Hardin County, where I am the educated hillbilly, Spencer Keck. And no uneducated, saying that I'm the educated hillbilly, that's not an oxymoron. Don't call me a moron. We know that there have been educated, erudite, and emancipated hillbillies here in Kentucky ever since my kith and kin came through the Cumberland Gap with Daniel Boone. All of us looking for our way to find life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And here we found it. Here we need to keep it. Y'all, if you haven't watched the news lately, boy, it is a humdinger. Besides our commander-in-chief bowing and kowtowing to a nation that he had been waging horrendous tariff wars that hurt us dearly here in Kentucky because we couldn't sell our soybeans to a country that bought so much of them and has now abandoned our soybean market. Well, now we're looking at this war in the Middle East. It's costing us, again, here in Kentucky. But who is not losing money? Well, we know it is Diaper Don. So, welcome to the District Report. And I'm your host, like I said, retired U.S. Navy Fleet Marine Force Corpsman, combat veteran, middle school teacher now in Jefferson County, after previously teaching here in Hardin County, and I'm a candidate for magistrate right here in Hardin County, Kentucky, District 3. I want to open today's episode with a number, just one number to start, 3,700. That is how many stock transactions the President of the United States has made in the first 3 months of 2026 while he was sitting in the Oval Office. While he was setting that tariff policy that I mentioned earlier, while his administration was brokering tech deals with tech giants, while his agencies were deciding which companies got regulated and which ones got a pass. Well, again, 3,700 individual stock transactions. Now, what was the value of those trades? New ethics filings from the Office of Government Ethics put the total somewhere between $220 million and $750 million in 90 days. The entire annual budget for Hardin County, Kentucky is $59 million. Let's marinate in that here just for a few seconds. Today, I want to break down what those ethics filings, what they're actually revealing to us, what some of the sharpest voices in the country are saying about them, and most importantly to us, what it means for the people of District 3 here in Hardin County, Kentucky. Because corruption at the top, that's not an abstraction. It has a zip code. It has a county road number and marker. It has a name on a school district budget. And folks, here we feel it. Even when Washington makes it impossible to connect the dots. Well, let's go on ahead and connect those dots. So, what the ethics filings actually show us. First, the facts, because if we're going to have this conversation, we're going to have to do it on a solid ground. On May 14th of this year, the White House submitted 2 financial disclosure forms. OGE Form 278-T reports to the Office of Government Ethics. These forms cover the first quarter of 2026, January through March. What they showed us was, by any measure, extraordinary. 3,700 plus Trump stock transactions quarter 1, 2026. Meaning, for a cumulative trade value, the reported range of 220 million all the way up to 750 million. That's greater than 60 trades per day on average. Man, more than 3,700 individual securities transactions, stocks in companies like Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, NVIDIA, Oracle, Broadcom, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, purchases in Apple and S&P 500 index funds, individual transactions valued between $5 million and $25 million. And the filing, by law, only shows value ranges, not exact figures. So we can't see that precise number. We know it's somewhere in that range. We know it's historic. Here's what else we know. Former White House Ethics Counsel Richard Painter told Forbes magazine that he has researched the financial history of every preceding president. His conclusion: I don't think we've had any president trade in the stock market. Let that marinate. Previous presidents held blind trusts or index funds. This is a first, and this is not a good one. The president also paid a late fee, a federal ethics fine, for missing the mandatory filing deadline. He was penalized for not disclosing these trades on time. This is not transparency. That is accountability after the fact, with a small check as the consequence. And then there's the Oracle situation. The filings show that millions of dollars of Oracle stock were purchased in early 2026, right around the time that the Trump administration was brokering a deal to keep TikTok operating in the United States under the Oracle-led consortium. The filing doesn't tell us who placed these trades or from which account. It just tells us they happened. That ambiguity alone should concern any honest person, regardless of which party they subscribe to. A Dell Technologies position worth up to $5 million was established on February 10th, before Trump publicly endorsed Dell hardware at the White House. NVIDIA stock was purchased right before the Commerce Department officially approved the sale of NVIDIA chips abroad. And who did the president take with him on his flight to China? A last-minute grab of the head of NVIDIA. There were far more businessmen, billionaires in his entourage than there were negotiators. The White House says there are no conflicts of interest in all of these stock trades, and that the president only acts in the interest of the American public. Well, I'll let you be the judge of that for yourself. Now, let's go on to segment 3 after we look at some comments here. See, I've got my viewer Ding Black here. Hi there, Ding. Good to see you. Thanks for showing up. All right. let's go on to segment 3, what the sharpest voices are saying. Now, I'm not alone in connecting these dots. Some of the most credible voices in the country, people who come at this from very different political and professional angles, have been sounding the alarm. I want to bring their words directly into this conversation because they said it way better than I could. Scott Galloway is a professor of marketing at NYU's Stern School of Business. He's an entrepreneur, and he is the co-host of the Prof G Pod alongside Jessica Tarlov, which, if you haven't heard it, is two sharp people from different sides of the aisle actually working through the news together. And we've had a lot of news to work together. So Galloway has been one of the clearest voices on what this trading behavior signals about the president's ethics and marketing integrity. Now, here's what Galloway said this year about Trump's relationship to the markets. And I want you to hear the business logic in this because it really matters. So this is what Scott Galloway said on Pivot Podcast. This is nothing but a weapon of insider trading. He can create volatility. Trust in markets is literally one of the jet fuels of our prosperity. The fish rots from the head. That came from his Pivot Podcast with Kara Swisher last year. Again, the fish rots from the head. Think about that framing. When the person at the top of the system is using the power of that position, the ability to move on markets with a tweet, to shift tariffs overnight, and to approve or deny chip sales, and is simultaneously holding active positions in the companies affected by those decisions, the entire system loses integrity. Not just for Wall Street, but for everyone who depends on a functioning economy. I know I do. I know you probably do too. So Galloway also said this at the World Economic Forum in Davos back in January, and it stuck with me. The call sign of America back then was consumerism. It was more cooperation, alliances. Now I feel that the American brand is chaos, corruption, and coercion. And that was quoted from him in a Fortune article, January 23rd, 2026. Let's look at those three words: chaos, corruption, and coercion. That is the brand that a sitting president trading 60 stocks a day while setting federal policy is projecting to the world. And more importantly, projecting to the people right here at home who need their government to be working for them. Galloway has also put it this way, and this is the framing that I want you to carry with you for the rest of this episode. This is a coin-operated president, and these individuals have decided that their one and only job is shareholder value. Think about that. Coin-operated, shareholder value, not community value, not county road value, not rural Kentucky value, shareholder value. Now, let me bring in Jessica Tarlov. She's a Democratic strategist, and she is the liberal voice on Fox News's The Five, which means, if anything, she's staying, and she's saying everything she says in a room that's trying to shout her down. And yet she's still saying it. On air, on Fox News, this week, Tarlov caught out the Q1 filings directly and said something that I think cuts right to the heart of the matter. She said, he's in control of policy. He should not be able to do that. He's the first president to do this. He is in control of policy. He should not be able to do that. That's not a left-wing talking point. That is an ethics talking point. The entire framework of presidential financial disclosure, the reason those OGE forms exist in the first place, it's built on the idea that the person holding the most powerful office in the world should not be personally profiting from the decisions that office requires them to make. That's the principle. And right now, that principle is being tested in real time. And no previous president has ever tested it. Not Reagan, not Bush 1, not their next president, nor the presidents after them, nor the presidents after them, all the way up until now, this president. Tarlov has also said this, and again, remember, she's saying this right on Fox News. The Trump administration says is going to go after fraud. It should redirect its attention to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Everything is a scam to get richer. That was said May 16th, 2026. So I'm not here to tell you who to agree with. I'm here to tell you, when the business professor and the Fox News Democrat are both using words like corruption and coin operated and for sale, and the same week those ethics filings get dropped, that's not partisan noise. That's a signal to us. That's our bat signal. All right, well, let's take a little break here and consider some other things that have been said and that are going on, and then I'll come over and we'll check and see what Tom Armstrong is saying today. Thanks for being here, Tom. So we know that we have a pay for play president. We also know that he has a vindictive streak. If you're in his own party, his vindictive streak will come right down on you. We need to really consider what that means for the integrity of the opposition party. So I'm looking at it and I'm thinking that this is something we should really consider.
It was, oh no, we're kidding. We didn't take out their nuclear capability in Iran. And now there's some quote unquote exclusive reporting from a single intelligence source about Cuban drones. Anyway, let's move on. Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana has lost his primary, becoming the first GOP senator to lose renomination in nearly a decade. Think about that. The first GOP senator to lose renomination in nearly a decade.
And we know that this president has directed his minions, such as Musk and others, to dump millions upon millions upon millions right here in Kentucky to get rid of a Kentucky Republican, Thomas Massey. He's trying to replace him with Eddie Gaurine at the last minute. And this should be something that gets our Kentucky dander up.
In 2021, Cassidy voted to convict President Donald Trump on impeachment charges following the January 6th Capitol attack. Trump actively backed his opponents in the primary. Here was Lindsey Graham's blunt warning. Let's watch.
Are you glad that Senator Cassidy is no longer going to be your colleague, Senator?
No, I like Bill. I thought he's a great senator, but he made a political decision. Bill Cassidy's lost because he tried to destroy Trump. Massey's going to lose because he's trying to destroy the agenda. You can disagree with President Trump, but if you try to destroy him, you're going to lose because this is the party of Donald Trump.
Did we hear that? He says, this is the party of Donald Trump. Remember, Lindsey Graham, before he started his 69-47 campaign, he was a never Trumper. But boy, did he change his tune, especially when he's grifting with the grifter.
he didn't decide to destroy Donald Trump. He voted to say it's a sunny day outside and the sky is blue, and Donald Trump fomented an insurrection. And he should not be able to serve in office again, which is what the conviction meant. Like, he'd already been impeached by the House. I really think the lesson for Bill Cassidy, I want to talk a little bit about his comments and his concession speech, is you can't go halfway with being principled.
Yeah.
If you're going to do the conviction, then you also don't vote for RFK Jr.
It's great.
So a person who did not go halfway with being principled is Thomas Massie. And he now is feeling the weight of his principles as, folks are saying, they're not so sure now, since all that dark money has been pumped into this race. This is the most expensive congressional race in U.S. history, happening right here in our state. All because a petulant diaper Don cannot stand the fact that someone else has principles. And that, well, we heard it from Lindsey Graham. If that's you, man, some things happen that
there have been more than $32 million spent on a primary in this congressional district, which is now the most expensive House primary ever in the United States. Is it worth it?
You'd have to ask Miriam Adelson on May 20th if it was worth it. Because, they tried to buy my vote for 14 years and it was never for sale. Now they're trying to buy a seat here in Kentucky. I think they underestimated the reserve price of my constituents. They waded into this. They thought they could buy this seat with a couple million. That didn't work. And now they're throwing good money after bad. The thing that surprised me is how much money we've been able to raise. I don't have 3 billionaires who want to just throw their money away. I've got the grassroots, tens of thousands of donations. Average donation for me is about $80.
So you turn on your TV right now, and if you're watching a local station, you're not going to see anything but back-to-back Eddie Gahlren ads slinging dirt at Massie. And then it'll probably be followed by one from Massie and then 2 more by Eddie Gahlren. I don't know if anyone else is selling anything on TV right now. We got hour and a half left before the polls close in this primary here in this state.
And we've been able to go toe to toe. A lot of that 32 million is coming from our side, but it's coming from regular working Americans.
When you say that they spent money to try to buy the seat, who are you talking about specifically?
I'm talking about the Israeli lobby, AIPAC, Republican Jewish Coalition, Miriam Adelson, Paul Singer, and John Paulson. These are the groups that have given 95% of the money to my opponent because they're mad at me over foreign policy. Now, what's interesting is my policy has always been, no country is special and no country deserves my constituents' taxpayer dollars. So I have never voted for foreign aid to Egypt, to Syria, to Israel, or to Ukraine. But the ones in Israel, since they're the biggest recipients of it, that makes them a little bit mad.
What's so wrong about helping defend Israel from Iranian threats?
We've got debt. I mean, at least with NATO, there's the promise of a reciprocal arrangement. With Israel, it's completely one way.
So we know that's also not the only reason that Massie got under the skin of Diaper Don. Probably the biggest reason is because he was the one who led the charge with Ro Khanna to open up the files, those e-files, which still have not been fully opened. And we passed the deadline that Massie and Ro Khanna got Congress to agree on. And the president even signed off on. But we know that Diaper Don does not forget. So where does that leave us? Well, let's just go back again. What is all this costing District 3? Let's bring it home. So let me tell you why I'm talking about this on a podcast about Hardin County, Kentucky. When I talk to folks in the rural part of District 3, you know, out there, Colesburg, in that area, out any of our areas, even if I go out of District 3 and I head towards Rineyville, Vine Grove, you know, and stretches of this county that don't always get the same attention as Elizabethtown proper, where, you know, also part of District 3 lies in. Well, they're not talking about Oracle stock. They're talking about roads. They're talking about whether flood damage gets repaired. They're talking about whether the county can fund the emergency services that their family depends on. They're talking about whether their kids' schools are getting what they need. Now, here's the budget reality for the Hardin County right now. The fiscal year 2025-2026 budget is $59,814,655. That's the whole county. Roads, public safety, the jail, county services, everything. The net operating budget is $23.5 million. The county is relying on a 4% property tax increase and drawing down money from a one-time hospital sale payout just to keep the books balanced. Judge Executive Tall said it plainly recently, it's difficult to balance growth needs against very limited funds. County road aid from the state, $2,214,000. The local government economic assistance fund, $272,000. These are the federal and state dollars that can filter down to the county, to the road your kids ride the school bus on, to the bridge farm equipment crosses, to the drainage infrastructure that failed during last year's flooding. Now, the President of the United States made somewhere between $220 million and $750 million in stock trades in the same 90 days that Hardin County was trying to figure out how to balance that $60 million budget. His single quarter of trading could fund this county's government for a decade. That's not just a contrast in numbers. That's a contrast in whose interests are being served. Now, here's how it works. And I want to be specific because this isn't abstract. Every administration has a finite amount of political attention, legislative energy, and executive focus. The question is always, where does that go? When the president is personally invested in big tech, in semiconductor companies, and Wall Street banks, those industries get the sun. They get the policy tailoring, the regulatory relief, the executive time. Rural counties in Kentucky, we're on the cold side of that equation. Not because anyone decided to punish us, but because we're not in the portfolio. And the financial pressure doesn't just come from the top. Kentucky's own budget analysts have flagged that state revenues are being squeezed by successive income tax cuts. The rate dropped from 5% to 3.5% over the last few years, costing the state over $2 billion revenue annually. Think about that. $2 billion lost annually. Federal policy cost shifting under proposals like the Big One Ugly Bill puts more of the burden on states and counties. A slowing national economy, driven in part by tariff uncertainty and business investment hesitation, both outcomes directly are tied to decisions made by the same administration that was trading 60 stocks a day. And it reduces the revenue that flows down to community like ours. None of this is labeled Hardin County. None of it shows up as a line item that says rural district cut. It works through 1,000 small redirections, a grant not funded, a federal program trimmed, a state allocation reduced because the state's revenues are down. And the communities that have the least political leverage feel those redirections hardest and discover them last. All right, so let's go look at what Tom said earlier before we go on to our next section. Take a little break here. Tom says, I challenge any maggot chud to show us a more corrupt regime in U.S. history. Not even Nixon was this corrupt. Not even Ronnie Reagan's. Not even Hoover, whose policies led to the Great Depression. I really think that this president is trying to copy Hoover, to be honest, and outdo him. That's my personal opinion. Tom didn't say that. Tom also said, and just saying Biden doesn't cut it. They have to defend their claim with verifiable data. That's Tom's opinion. I'm going to back it up here in a second. Tom also said, several years ago, my folks were in the district misrepresented by Massey. There have been some alterations in the district maps, so they got to vote for Compton. Woohoo! All right, that's good to hear. All right, well, let's look a little bit at what Tom just said. Let's take another little gander at what he was mentioning, because if we look at the fact that, this regime and this president still want to try and blame the last president for the economy we have. Let's just remember this. The people who promised to fix everything on day one are still out here blaming Joe Biden on day 467. And that was from 2 weeks ago. So we're many more days into that. But just think about that. We're now 470 or 80 some days into this regime, and they're still blaming the last guy. One thing I learned when I was the head of a medical department on a destroyer in the Navy, that medical department had many, many, many moving parts. It had things that people didn't know that I had to do behind the scenes with a budget of millions. But as soon as I took over that medical department and saluted the guy that I relieved, and he left the ship and I was in charge, I was also the one responsible for any mistakes that he left behind, if he did. I could not blame it on him. And that is the way politics goes too. Especially if you say you're going to fix everything on day one. And we definitely know that did not happen. So, what is it that we are going to do? What does this mean to us? How is it relevant to us? So, let's think about that a bit. The answer, in my opinion, this is my humble opinion, is that servant leadership starts at home. Leaders should not be all about serving themselves. It shouldn't be about self-aggrandizement. So what do we do with all this? I'll tell you what I'm doing. I'm running for magistrate here in Hardin County's District 3, and I want to be clear about what that means and why it matters, especially in light of everything that we've just talked about. I spent my career in the United States Navy as a Fleet Marine Force hospital corpsman. And I stepped up and became an independent duty corpsman, the pinnacle of a corpsman's career. is as an independent duty corpsman. We are the Navy's cheap doctor, nurse, PA, health inspector, all wrapped up in one. I served in combat. I ran a medical department aboard a combatant ship. I also was in charge of medical care for Marines in the field because my career went from 1990 to 2014. I saw a lot of different places that I took care of folks, whether it be in clinics, on ships, or with the Marines in the field, or Navy EOD units. But that combatant ship, that department had a multi-million-dollar budget. I was accountable for every piece of equipment, every supply line, every training requirement, every health outcome of the crew. And I served right alongside that crew. I was responsible to them. Their health and well-being rested on my shoulders. There was no passing the buck. There was the mission, the people, and the responsibility. And that's it. When I was a junior corpsman, and I first thought about being an independent duty corpsman, one of the independent duty corpsmen that I was serving with told me, it's like, Doc Cat, who can this ship not get underway, go to sea without? And I said, well, the captain. I said, no, that's what the XO is for. I said, well, then the XO. He said, no, that's what the chief engineer is for. He said, the only person that ship cannot get underway without is the independent duty corpsman. And he was right. You know, no one else on the ship could step in and be the doc for the ship. So there was the mission, like I said, there were the people, and then there was the responsibility. I carried it. And that was it. When Scott Galloway talks about a coin-operated president whose one job has become shareholder value above anything else, I know what the opposite of that looks like. I've lived it. Servant leadership is not a brand. It's not a bumper sticker. It sure as heck isn't sexy. It's a practice. It means the people you serve every day, they come first, every time, even when it's inconvenient. And when there's no audience, even when the decision costs you something. That's what I'm bringing to the fiscal court when you vote for me in November. Now, here's my core commitment to District 3. Wherever you live inside of Elizabethtown, city limits, or 15 miles out on a county road, you deserve the same quality of life services from your county government. The same responsiveness when you call. The same attention to your road, your drainage, and your safety. The same seat at the table when the county budget is decided. That is not complicated, but it requires someone at that table who is accountable to you, not to a stock portfolio, not to a donor class, not to a political future somewhere else, just to you. Jessica Tarlov said something this week that I keep coming back to. She said, speaking of the president, he should not be able to do that. And she is right. But the follow-up question is, if the people at the top can't be counted on to hold themselves to that standard, if the accountability structure at the federal level has broken down this badly, then what? Then it falls to us, the people, and it falls to local leadership, because local government is the level of government that actually shows up. The magistrate is the level where your call gets returned, where your road gets paved or it doesn't, where the rural side of the district is remembered or forgotten. Now, I'm not running for magistrate to make a national statement. I'm running because the folks in District 3 deserve a representative who actually has been accountable for something. A budget, a mission, lives. Who shows up? Not because it's politically convenient, but because that's what servant leadership requires. The President of the United States, he filed his ethics disclosure late. He paid the fine and moved on. In the Navy, if I missed a required readiness filing, there was no moving on. If I didn't have training in order, vaccinations in order, and all the medical records in order, and all the medical logistics in order, there was no moving on. I would be moving out. And someone else would have been found quickly, and it would have been painful, but there would have been someone brought in to replace me. Because that's how much it means. That's what servant leadership requires. Responsibility, integrity. So, there was a reckoning, like I said, if I didn't do my job in the Navy. That's the standard that I hold myself to. That's the standard that District 3 deserves from its fiscal court. Now, here's what I'm asking of you. Learn what the fiscal court actually does. Find out where District 3 budget goes and where it doesn't. Ask whether the rural parts of this district are getting the same attention as the rest. And if you believe, just like I do, that they should be, then get involved. Talk to your neighbors. Show up to fiscal court meetings. And on election day, vote for someone whose financial interests are your interests. Whose wins, they're your wins. I'm your host, Spencer Keck. I'm your candidate. This has been my district report. And I really hope that we all can take something away from this and think about it. Because it's your county, it's your state, it's your district. All right, before I close off, got Jonathan on here saying, hoorah, double dot. That's right, hoorah. So, in addition, I want us to think again. Last night I talked about what would my papaw say if he saw what is going on in DC. And I really think I know what he would say. I told you that last night. He would not be happy about it. Now let's just look at and consider what this administration is doing just to burn the bridges and burn down their own house in order to kick out one of their own, Thomas Massie. Like I said, I don't agree with 90% of what he has voted for and done in the past. But I do believe in holding the folks accountable for the e-files that he believed should be held accountable. I do believe that we need people that are truly responsible and held accountable for this conflict in the Middle East, for the loss of lives, for overall, biggest thing. There should be accountability there. There should be a real knowledge of what the reason and plan and strategy is. It shouldn't be first, oh, we're there for regime change. And then after the regime doesn't really change, let's change the figurehead. Oh, we're there to get rid of nukes. Oh, we're there to open the Strait of Hormuz, which was open before we started this whole thing. So let's look at this. Sean Ryan posted $32 million and an entire administration mobilized to destroy one congressman. His crime? Demanding answers about Epstein class abuse networks and refusing to let child predators hide behind political cover. If that level of firepower doesn't tell you who's being protected, nothing will. Go Massey. Sean Ryan is not a liberal activist at all. He's very conservative. But he has opened his eyes to what's going on. And the scales have been lifted from his eyes. So take that one to the bank. We say we want fiscal responsibility. We want our taxpayer dollars to be treated as if they are sacrosanct. So what do we think of this? Right? At the bottom there it says, oh, the Capitol Police broke my bat with their head. All right, here's your $1.7 billion taxpayer fund. Stay strong. So again, we know that now when Trump was in China, he actually completely reversed course on 3 campaign promises he made. Well, it's actually one promise he made 3 times. He said 3 times in the campaign, he stressed it, that he would stop China from buying American farmland. It really should matter in this state where we're losing our heritage farms, one after the other after the other. And in this county, we've got to make sure we can't see this happen over and over again. If you remember correctly, the president said that was a national security crisis for us, losing American farmland. He rolled out the National Farm Security Action Plan in July of 2025. And he was going to ban Chinese purchases of American farms. But this week, and while he was in Beijing, he told Sean Hannity it actually helps farmers. And Obama did nothing about it anyway. So Marjorie Taylor Greene, Cernovich, and Robbie Starbuck are publicly losing it. The reversal took one trip over to Z in China. But hey, guys, the libs got owned in 2024. That's what matters, right? What did your MAGA uncle promise you that he'd never let happen? He'd never let American farms get sold. I know that's what my MAGA kin told me. But did that actually happen? No, didn't keep that promise. Right? But hey, at least they owned the libs. Now, again, we talked tonight about how the president has been buying stocks left and right. Did you know that he bought Palantir shares weeks before publicly praising the AI and defense contractor stock by name and ticker on Truth Social? Well, Palantir knows it because the value of their stock skyrocketed as soon as he did that. And the stock that he bought in it went right up too. So again, our grifter in chief, this is where we sit. We've got to think about it because it definitely affects Hardin County. Day in, day out. Now, we were told that the president was going to talk to the Chinese president about China helping Iran. And the president actually had a reply to that when a reporter asked him, if he asked about that. And here's what we got. Reporter, did you talk to Chinese president about China helping Iran? Trump. He said no military stuff, but yeah, they buy tons of oil from Iran and plan to keep it that way. Translation, China basically said, get lost. And if you looked and listened to him when he walked out of that, you knew that's what he was told. So, it's absolutely time. We've got a little bit, slightly more than an hour before our primaries are over. Let's see what we actually have as our principles, Kentucky. Who do we believe are the people that held the principles that we hold dear, and who are going to share them in DC, who are going to work for us? Because tell me if this is. Trump recently said he was holding a pending $14 billion arms sale to Taiwan in abeyance, and that approval depends on China. He called the package a very good negotiating chip. But Taiwan's weapons shouldn't be treated as leverage to be traded with Beijing. Deterrence delayed is deterrence degraded. Taiwan needs its weapons before a crisis begins. Now, do we think that China is going to bother telling Iran anything? Our actions in the Strait of Hormuz and against Iran are doing nothing but helping China. Because as we spend our arsenal on Iran, China knows we have nothing to defend Taiwan with. And why do they want Taiwan? Well, they've wanted it forever, but now Taiwan makes the world's supply of chips. Remember that chip shortage we had back in, during the COVID period of 2022? How much it hurt our world economy? How much it drove up the price of vehicles because we couldn't make any vehicles without those chips? There was a backlog. I bought my vehicle during that time. People were jacking up the prices at the dealerships left and right. And what did President Biden do when he came into office? He said, hey, this is a national security issue. We've got to make chips here. And that's when we started getting serious about making our own chips. It is a national security issue for our chips not to be made in the US of A. But right now, as we said earlier, NVIDIA, their chips are in the president's portfolio. He took the NVIDIA chief over to China to talk with Xi, to try to get Xi to buy NVIDIA chips because China has no chips. Do we really think that Xi is going to buy NVIDIA chips when all he has to do is drive his ships, float his ships, and fly his planes straight over 100 miles down to Taiwan and take over that country? Now that we have no way of defending a country that is our ally, Taiwan? Think about it, folks. This is what we're voting on. This is important. It matters to Hardin County. All right, y'all. I'm about to close up. Going to go start watching the poll results. Y'all, I hope that you had a great primary day. I hope to goodness you got out there and took part in this primary, that you put people on the ballots that we're going to get to decide on in November. I hope you put people of principle, of honor, of integrity, And most importantly, I hope you looked for servant leadership. Y'all, let's remember, we must, in these days, stay kind to one another, stay sharp, keep your powder dry, and stay frosty. And have a great rest of the week. School's about to let out.